Microsoft AZ-305 exam practice questions are available in the video for you to study. You plan to deploy an Azure bare metal infrastructure instance that will host the data tier of a business-critical workload. The application tier of the workload will be hosted on Azure virtual machines. You need to configure the virtual machines to minimize network latency between the application tier and the data tier. What should you use? A. An availability zone. B. ExpressRoute FastPath. C. An availability set. D. A proximity placement group. The answer is D. Proximity placement groups, PPGs, are used in Azure to minimize network latency between Azure compute resources like virtual machines, availability sets, or virtual machine scale sets by placing them physically close together in the same data center. In this scenario, since the data tier is hosted on bare metal infrastructure and the application tier on VMs, using a PPG ensures they are physically near each other, resulting in low latency communication, which is ideal for performance-sensitive, business-critical workloads. Related skill: Design infrastructure solutions. What two parameters would you recommend set up to ensure that the new IPS customers database will scale to meet the workload demands? A. Define the maximum of CPU cores. B. Define the maximum resource limit per group of databases. C. Define the maximum of database transaction units. D. Define the maximum of the allocated storage. E. Define the maximum size for a database. The answer is CE. When designing a scalable Azure SQL database or elastic pool, you must plan for performance and storage needs. Two key parameters are: C. Define the maximum of database transaction units, DTUs. DTUs, or vCores in newer models, represent a blended measure of CPU, memory, and read-write performance. Setting a maximum ensures that the database can handle spikes in workload by having enough compute resources. D. Define the maximum of the allocated storage. Storage limits determine how much data the database can store. Defining this helps plan for growth and avoid running into capacity issues as the database scales. Related skill: Design data storage solutions. You have an on-premises Microsoft SQL Server 2016 database named DB1. You have an Azure subscription. You need to migrate DB1 to an Azure SQL database by using the Azure SQL Migration extension for Azure Data Studio. What should you do first? A. Configure a site-to-site S2S VPN connection. B. Define the schema for the Azure SQL database. C. Create a user-assigned managed identity. D. Upgrade DB1. The answer is A. The Azure SQL Migration extension for Azure Data Studio supports migrating SQL Server databases to Azure SQL Managed Instance or Azure SQL Database. However, SQL Server 2016 is not fully compatible with some features required for direct migration using the Azure SQL Migration extension, especially if you're targeting Azure SQL Database, not managed instance. Upgrading DB1 ensures compatibility with DMA, Data Migration Assistant, checks and reduces risk of breaking changes or unsupported features. Related skill: design data storage solutions. You are designing a point-of-sale (POS) solution that will be deployed across multiple locations and will use an Azure Databricks workspace in the standard tier. The solution will include multiple apps deployed to the on-premises network of each location. You need to configure the authentication method that will be used by the app to access the workspace. The solution must minimize the administrative effort associated with staff turnover and credential management. What should you configure? A managed identity. B. A service principal. C. A personal access token. The answer is A. Managed identities in Azure are designed for Azure services to authenticate to other Azure resources without needing credentials, like passwords or access tokens. The key benefit here is that Azure handles the identity lifecycle, which minimizes administrative effort related to staff turnover and manual credential management. In this scenario, using a managed identity for the POS apps allows them to securely authenticate to the Azure Databricks workspace without needing to manually manage or rotate credentials. When staff leave, the identity remains intact, and there's no need to update the app's credentials. Related skill: design identity, governance, and monitoring solutions. You have an Azure App Service app named App1. You need to recommend a solution to monitor the response times of App1 for end users. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you include in the recommendation? A. Health check in App Service. B. Log analytics. C. Application insights. D. Azure Network Watcher Connection Monitor. The answer is C. Application Insights is a powerful application performance monitoring (APM) tool that automatically collects telemetry data, including response times for end users, request rates, and failure rates. It provides deep insights into how your app is performing from an end-user perspective. It is fully integrated with Azure App Service, so you can easily enable it with minimal setup, and it requires little to no administrative overhead once configured. Related skill: design identity, governance, and monitoring solutions. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL account named Account 1 and an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace named Workspace 1. The Account 1 account contains a container named Container 1 that has the analytical store enabled. You need to recommend a solution that will process the data stored in Container 1 in near real-time (NRT) and output the results to a data warehouse in Workspace 1 by using a runtime engine in the workspace. The solution must minimize data movement. Which pool in Workspace should you use? A. Serverless SQL. B. Data Explorer. C. Dedicated SQL. D. Apache Spark. The answer is B. Azure Synapse Analytics Data Explorer Pool is specifically designed to process large amounts of data in near real-time. It integrates with services like Azure Cosmos DB and can efficiently process the data from a container with the analytical store enabled, making it ideal for this scenario. Data Explorer is optimized for working with log and telemetry data in near real-time and is ideal for workloads that need low-latency processing and minimal movement of data across systems. Related skill: design data storage solutions. You have an Azure subscription that contains 1,000 resources. You need to generate compliance reports for the subscription. The solution must ensure that the resources can be grouped by department. What should you use to organize the resources? A. Application groups and quotas. B. Resource groups and role assignments. C. Azure policy and tags. D. Administrative units and Azure Lighthouse. The answer is C. Azure policy helps you enforce compliance by applying rules that manage and monitor your resources. Tags are used to categorize resources by attributes, such as department, environment, or project. These can be used to group and report on resources in a way that is meaningful to your organization. When you use Azure policy in conjunction with tags, you can ensure that your resources are not only compliant but also organized by logical categories such as departments, and you can generate reports that reflect these groupings. Related skill: design identity, governance, and monitoring solutions. You have 100 devices that write performance data to Azure Blob Storage. You plan to store and analyze the performance data in an Azure SQL database. You need to recommend a solution to continually copy the performance data to the Azure SQL database. What should you include in the recommendation? A. Azure Database Migration Service. B. Azure DataBox. C. Data Migration Assistant, DMA. D. Azure Data Factory. The answer is D. Azure Data Factory, ADF, is a cloud-based data integration service that allows you to automatically copy and transform data from Azure Blob Storage into other services like Azure SQL Database. It is ideal for continuous data pipelines that need to handle large volumes of data and automate data movement from various sources, like blob storage, to your target destination, SQL database, in a seamless manner. ADF is designed for ETL, extract, transform, load, operations and can run on a schedule or trigger, making it the best fit for your scenario of continually copying performance data from blob storage into the SQL database. Related skill: design data storage solutions. You have an Azure web app that uses an Azure Key Vault named Key Vault 1 in the West US Azure region. You are designing a disaster recovery plan for Key Vault 1. You plan to back up the keys in Key Vault 1. You need to identify to where you can restore the backup. What should you identify? A. Key Vault 1 only. B. The same region only. C. The same geography only. D. Any region worldwide. The answer is C. Azure Key Vault allows you to back up and restore keys, but the restore operation is restricted by geographic boundaries. When you back up a key vault, the backup can only be restored to another key vault within the same geography. For example, West US and East US are in the same geography, but West US and Europe are not. Geography refers to a collection of Azure regions within a specific physical location, e.g., North America, Europe, etc. This ensures data residency compliance and minimizes latency. You have 12 Azure subscriptions and 3 projects. Each project uses resources across multiple subscriptions. You need to use Microsoft Cost Management to monitor costs on a per-project basis. The solution must minimize administrative effort. Which 2 components should you include in the solution? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. Budgets. B. Resource tags. C. Custom role-based access control, RBAQ roles. D. Management groups. E. Azure boards. The answer is BD. B. Resource tags. Tags are a great way to categorize resources by different criteria, such as project, department, or environment. By using resource tags like project, project A, or department HR, you can easily group and monitor costs for each project across multiple subscriptions. Once you assign these tags to your resources, you can use cost management to filter and track costs by project. D. Management groups. Management groups in Azure provide a hierarchical way to organize your subscriptions. You can create management groups for each project and place the relevant subscriptions under these groups. This will allow you to track costs at the management group level, making it easier to monitor costs by project without needing to manually manage each subscription. This approach helps with centralized management of your costs and reduces administrative overhead.